I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, well, when it comes to fish and chips, we all know they're a part of a British tradition, and the Golden Chippy is an award-winning restaurant, and for years they've been serving the community here in Greenwich, and even today on a Sunday they are fully packed today. But this is the issue. Here we've got a mural and which says a great British meal. Residents who live in this area who've complained to Greenwich Council, who say it's inappropriate considering it's in a conservation area. Here's what some of the local people we've been speaking to had to say.
What's wrong with it? It looks all right, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Look at some left graffiti they've got round in Greenwich. They don't want to take that down, do they? But when you've got something like this, it's half decent, they want to remove it.
Fantastic artwork. I really like it. Reminds me of Banksy.
Well, those are the views here from people who live in this local area. But I'm kindly joined by Chris, the owner. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You've been here for 20 years now. Tell me how this issue has come up.
They take pictures. It's only been up for about a month. And it's been very, very popular. I don't want to believe that any of the locals are complaining that this is too loud or anything like that. They say it needs planning permission. How a little thing like this needs planning permission, I don't know.
Are you working with an artist in this local area?
I've got a local guy that does murals, so he said, would you like me to do something for you? I said, yes, why not? I said, make sure you leave a bit of space for people to stand there so they can take some selfies or pictures or whatever they want to do from Golden Chippy. And it's been extremely popular, and not one person has come to me and said, that looks terrible. So I cannot imagine the person that complained about this. I think it's just council.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. As usual on a Sunday morning, it's great to be here. It's been another very busy week in Westminster. The Prime Minister and the Labour leader have for once been united on two fronts, that we shouldn't mess with the St George's Cross and, of course, in their support of the Princess of Wales in her battle against cancer. We, of course, wish Catherine all the very best with her chemotherapy treatment. We'll be covering that story later on in the show. Former Education Minister Andrea Jenkyns will be here in the studio discussing why she thinks Rishi Sunak needs to go to save the Tories from electoral oblivion. I'll be speaking to Labour's Anneliese Dodds as the Shadow Women and Equalities Minister. Can she clarify for once and for all how Labour defines a woman? I will also be joined by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in the studio after suggesting that 100 grand isn't really that much in Surrey to be earning. Is he out of touch with the average Brit? And can he convince voters that he can improve the economy at last? Author and historian Sir Anthony Selden will be here to share his thoughts as Boris Johnson's biographer on whether the former Prime Minister can stage a comeback. And Elsa Anderson, the former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, will be here to discuss the devastating news of the Princess of Wales's cancer diagnosis. Don't go anywhere. Well, as usual, let's get into the Sunday morning newspapers. I'm joined now by my former boss, former editor of the Sunday Express, Martin Townsend. He's now a partner at Pagefield, a senior partner at Pagefield. Martin, lovely to see you. I mean, if we'd been working together on this story, my goodness me, you'd dedicate a lot of today's paper to it, and a lot of the Sunday papers have done that.
Yes.
News of Kate's shock cancer diagnosis. I mean, first of all, how did you react on Friday when she made this quite extraordinary announcement on video?
I think, like most people in the country, I was very shocked and very upset by it. But I thought it was an absolutely remarkable statement. I think in it was just it was brilliant, actually, and I think it will be poured over. Obviously is being poured over at great length now, but I think it will be poured over in the future as well as a fantastic example of how you can manage this kind of terrible news and at the same time show extraordinary empathy, both for your family and for other sufferers, but also for the country, because the country is jittery. I mean, we have a very jittery UK at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, the government is all over the place. They're not at all sure. I personally don't think about the incoming government, although they seem to be wanting to vote for them. There's war in the world, etc., etc. And they're not. And people expect the royal family. They want the royal family to be secure. They want to feel comfortable with the royal family. And I thought that Kate went a long way to making people feel reassured, as well as making our own family feel reassured.
with a former editor's hat on and now kind of a PR hat, do you think it was good that she did it in video form? I mean, we understand from some of the coverage this morning that she thought it might be a bit too sterile to sort of release a statement, but she's not the most natural public speaker in the world. She's always struggled a little bit, actually, with giving speeches because she's naturally quite shy and an introvert. She had a steely determination in that video. I wrote a piece for The Telegraph yesterday where it did remind me a bit of Queen Elizabeth II, you know, sort of trying to reassure the nation by speaking not just as a royal, but obviously as a mum and a wife too.
Yes, the famous COVID speech, the We'll Meet Again speech, which was you know, a similar kind of thing. I thought it was perfect to do it on video, frankly. And my wife and a lot of her women friends were saying that, you know, they thought that it was perfect. I mean, she was sort of fiddling with her fingers a bit, and that was the bit that actually moved a lot of my wife's friends. This sort of fiddling with the fingers. She was obviously very upset and, you know, stressed, I think. But she came across, you know, it broadly in the video, I think, as being very reassuring.
What's your reflections on the sort of media coverage of some of the conspiracy theories and indeed the sort of false rumours? I mean, I wrote a piece saying that I thought the troll should be called out, this kind of, and people completely anonymously behind faceless computers spewing out this frankly sort of virtual vomit on a daily basis is appalling. Then some people sort of came back at that piece and said, well, you're in the media, so you're to blame as well. You've been hounding her. I mean, actually, personally speaking, I've only written a couple of stories about her and her health, both of which said leave her alone and let her recuperate.
Yes,
but let's not let facts get in the way of a good trolling. But what do you think? Has the media mishandled it? Has Kensington Palace mishandled it a bit in kind of losing track of the narrative?
I think there was a bit of mishandling from the palace. I think the picture was a mistake in retrospect. I think putting a picture out was a mistake. I think it went out at a time of, you know, maximum sort of speculation on social media. And, you know, it was bound to cause even more problems than it did. I think there has been a big difference from the way newspapers have covered this story and the way social media has been disgraceful. And I think for the CEO of X/Twitter, Linda Yaccarino, to come out yesterday, I think it was, and say, you know, make this kind of statement about Kate and said, you know, that she hopes that she'll get privacy, is absolute nonsense.
I mean, they've done nothing about anonymous trolling at all.
What needs to happen, and we've seen today with one of the worst trolls being unmasked, he was hiding behind a nom de plume, a pseudonym. This mustn't happen anymore.
Yeah, this is this guy, Paul Condon, who is in the Mail on Sundays, being exposed for recording these vile TikTok videos, but as you say, under a pseudonym.
Yeah, I mean, either X come out and say that you cannot go on Twitter unless you do it under your real name and have people under their real names. This is going to continue because these are cowards, these people, who will hide behind pseudonyms.
To be honest, some people behave appallingly on X, even when they do name themselves.
Yes, true.
We know of quite high-profile people that behave appallingly on there.
Is true.
One story that I just noticed in our old paper, The Sunday Express, scientists baffled by the worrying increase in UK cancer diagnoses among the under-50s. I remember doing an interview with some breast cancer specialists at Barts who talked about this, who talked about the fact that they were seeing much younger women in their post-pandemic, maybe because they hadn't got to hospital in time and, you know, the cancer had developed too much because of the lockdown. However, younger people under 50s being diagnosed with cancer more, what do you put that down to?
Well, I mean, I think, refer to our previous conversation, I think we live in a very uncertain world, and I think if you're one of those sort of in that kind of age group, you're worried about losing your job. You've got all this stuff about AI, that AI is going to take everybody's work and take away their professions, etc., etc. You're worried about your children because the world is so unsafe at the moment.
Yeah.
You know,
stress.
I think there is an awful lot of stress around, and I think that is a particularly stressed grouping, and you know, there's not an awful lot of joy out there at the moment, unfortunately.
And in the case of the royal family, they couldn't have had a more stressful 3 or 4 years,
well,
to be honest.
it's just been appalling, hasn't it?
The Moscow terror attack, obviously it's in all of the newspapers, but because of the Princess of Wales news, it's not being quite as amplified as much as it probably should be. I mean, this is a major terror attack, 133 lives claimed, I think another 150 in hospital. Putin now weaponising it and trying to blame Ukraine for what is the actions of ISIS is obviously an interesting take from the Russian president. I mean, does this just escalate matters, do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, my heart goes out to, obviously, the families of those people that were slaughtered in that massacre. But at the same time, I think there is a certain... I think because of the war in Ukraine and because people just don't believe what Putin says, any incident like this, I think people are very sceptical about it all, about what actually happened, etc., etc. Now, it has been claimed as an Islamic attack, and I think that, you know, that obviously that's sort of, you know, that's the claim that's out there. But now, of course, he's weaponising it, and so people are saying, well, you know, how did it come about, and this, that, and the other. I mean, I think there's always kind of doubts around Putin. This is the problem he's got.
Emboldened by being elected for another 6 years.
Well,
with 89% of the vote, would you believe? I wonder how that happened.
Having got rid of all of his, you know,
his main opponents, and Alexei Navalny dying in very suspicious circumstances in a Siberian prison. Let's talk about Rishi Sunak. Of course, again, there is coverage of, you know, his leadership. Can he go the distance? I thought it was interesting to see Dan Hodges particularly writing in the Mail on Sunday that he's sort of a zombie PM, in power but not in charge. I mean, what do you make of these claims? And I've got Andrea Jenkyns coming in just a moment after you. She's one of the MPs to have admitted to putting in a letter of no confidence. But are they just turkeys voting for Christmas? What's going on here?
Well, I mean, to me, it's crazy. I mean, on the one hand, there's an irony, I think, at the centre of all this, which is that they're making these noises because they're worried about the fact that the Tory vote is going down, and, you know, the gap between them and Reform has closed. I think it's about 5 points now. The Labour lead keeps increasing. But, of course, it's exactly this chatter about a new leader that is causing people to lose faith with the Tories. Every time somebody comes out and says, let's replace Rishi, that's another 200, 300 votes, I don't know, thousands of votes possibly, that are just lost at that point. So I don't understand that. Rishi Sunak himself is not doing himself any favours. From all accounts, he's micromanaging everything, including the dishwasher in 10 Downing Street, going up to check that it's been loaded properly. This is just crazy stuff, and it's the sign of someone who really doesn't know what to do. It's that old thing of, like, you know, I'm under stress, I'll go and tidy my sock drawer.
It's working hard behind the scenes, I think, is the shtick.
Exactly.
But it's not working for his poll rating, that's for sure.
And he should be attacking Labour. This is the time to attack Labour. They have, you know, no policies, no ideas.
We've had a Labour and Conservative consensus, haven't we, on the St George's Cross and the way it's been depicted on the back of the England shirt. I know you've got strong feelings about
Very
this.
strong
As an England fan and a Chelsea fan, what you've said that you're going to boycott this shirt.
Yes, well, we'll draw a veil over me being a Chelsea fan at the moment, I think. But anyway, the fact is that, no, I've said I'm not going to watch any England games while they're wearing that shirt. I feel very strongly about it. I feel strongly about it because I think these national symbols matter. And I also feel strongly about it because it's an American company, Nike, who have a history of virtue signalling.
Yeah,
so
it was apparently going to be a rainbow, this cross.
Yeah.
But I wrote a column about it. What other country would be putting up with this?
Oh, well, certainly not the US, that's for sure.
Well, not the US, but imagine, like, if you tampered with the saltire or you took the dragon off the Welsh flag.
Yes.
The uproar, but apparently it's perfectly fine to not have a red and white flag.
Because that is how a certain section of Britain feels about England. They're not proud of England.
Yeah, but they're a very vocal minority, aren't they?
Very vocal minority.
I get that the flag has in the past been tainted with sort of far-right thuggery, but the vast majority of people who wave that George's Cross, not just at the football, but at royal events, at concert, are representative of multicultural England. I mean, this is the irony of the debate about...
Absolutely.
I thought it's interesting, Home Secretary James Cleverly saying, vote with your feet and don't buy the shirt. At 125 quid, I'm not minded to buy it anyway.
I think it's 127, actually. But I mean, it's a horrible nylon shirt.
Yes,
so.
Well, to be fair, football shirts are always horrible and nylon, but at the same time, I think for that amount of money, I'm probably better well spent elsewhere.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for joining me this morning,
Pleasure.
Martin. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Well, as I said, I've got former Education Minister Andrea Jenkyns coming into the studio in just a moment. She's one of the, I think, 2 Tory MPs to have admitted putting in a letter against Rishi Sunak. But who would she like to see in charge of the Tory party and indeed the government instead? Find out more about that and with other guests coming up, including Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. See you in just a moment.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
And I'd like to talk about Kate Middleton. Because I'm really confused here. Everyone, where is she? What is she doing? Why did she Photoshop this? Where this, what that? Why can't we just leave her alone? What is going on here? What's your thoughts on this?
I think it's tough because naturally, you know, if I was looking at this and we didn't have all the context of everything that's gone on in the royal family previously, I would be saying leave her alone. But at the same time, I think that the royal family have made a huge mistake by setting a certain precedent when it comes to Meghan. And I think that when you've kind of branded Meghan as the one that's demanding privacy, but then not really realising that she's got a particular role and a duty and has to kind of be paraded in front of us no matter what, then you end up in a position now when Kate really needs the privacy and she can't get it because we're so used to being in their business and finding out everything about them, even after they've given birth. That precedent
I get
when
that,
the women.
But what if it's a mental health issue? What if it's something like that, or a long, ongoing physical thing that she doesn't want to talk about?
But you know what it is? It's because everyone sees the royal family as like ambassadors, so they're thinking, well, she's at home, and some people controversially will be like, well, we need to see her. She's like the face of multiple charities. They're basically, unfortunately, with the royal family, if they're not seen, people are like, well, what's the point of them? And I know that sounds harsh, but, you know, this is not some person that she can't work from home.
Well, she's been described as the golden goose.
100%.
I mean, they rely on her a lot, don't they? I mean, she's front page of the newspapers whenever she steps out. It's been amazing, actually, seeing photos of her this morning, how much we all miss her. You know, we haven't seen her since just after Christmas. What do you think about her being the one to apologise?
Having her take the rap for it, even if she did do it, I think that was quite unfair, really, and they should have had, you know, a bit of a better strategy.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to GB News. You're watching the Camilla Tominey Show. Lovely to have your company this Sunday morning. I'm delighted to be joined now by Andrea Jenkyns. She's the former Education Minister and Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood. And if you don't mind me saying, Andrea, if I may call you that, quite a big Rishi Sunak critic. You're one of, I think, only Tory MPs to have admitted submitting letters of no confidence. Is that the wisest idea? We just had Martin Townsend talking on the papers about it being sort of turkeys voting for Christmas. How will it help at this late stage to replace the Prime Minister?
I mean, I gave it a lot of thought back in November when I submitted it, and what you see is what you get with me, Camilla.
Sure.
And I believed in going public about that. And I think that it is less chance saloon. We've seen the polls. We've seen how things are difficult for the party. It's like one of the lowest polls. We're just hemorrhaging votes and we're not cutting through to the electorate. So I think less chance saloon. What have we got to lose, Camilla?
I mean, the election, people could argue, because I think there was some polling in the week to suggest that actually Conservative voters are more likely to vote for Rishi Sunak than any of the other candidates. I appreciate other polls have differed. There was one which said that Penny Mordaunt might be better, but you wouldn't be supportive of Penny Mordaunt because she's a One Nation Tory, right?
Well, the thing is about the polling, though, it depends how many the sample was. I mean, did you see the big Lady McAlpine one? That was 13,500, and that put Boris top. I think Penny was second, and but it did put a lot of the centre-right of the party towards the top. So,
how many letters do you think have been submitted?
I mean, look, let's face it. Graham Braid is the only one that knows, but I mean, when I last calculated, because people, since I put my letter in, lots of people coming up to me telling me, "Oh, we've done the same. Well done on you," and I got. In my count of people telling me that was over 30, but this was weeks ago. So I think we must be nearer to 40 now.
And then if you, I mean, it could be that you accidentally trigger a no-confidence vote, and then the vote itself, even if he wins it, could be sort of fatal, because when a Prime Minister is challenged this close to a general election, of course you have to replace. But do you not understand the notion of the criticisms around, you know, too much regicide, that at the end of the day, yeah, you're in a desperately difficult situation, but that changing leader now will be just catastrophic? And
look, the thing I want most of all is us to be more conservative. I mean, we're not cutting through in the red wall seats like mine. And we need more common sense conservative policies. I mean, some of the things in the budget, £1 million for a monument when people are struggling. That's
what do you mean, the monument to the Muslim soldiers?
Yes, but I think spending £1 million full stop on a monument when people are struggling, I don't think that's necessarily the best use of taxpayers' money.
But who would you have instead then? Because there's lots of talk about different candidates sort of jockeying for position. We've discussed Penny Mordaunt. You wouldn't want to see her leading the party, I take it?
I mean, look, I mean, Penny, I know Penny. She's a lovely lady. We've just got completely different politics. So.
You don't think she's conservative enough?
I'd like to see somebody who's more conservative, definitely.
OK, so Suella Braverman then?
I like Suella, I like Pretty, I like Jacob.
Jacob to run the party?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think Jacob's electable as a Prime Minister? Do you think
he goes down quite well in my area. I mean,
does he go down well with kind of working class people in the Red Wall?
Well, all I can give an example is he came up to my St George's Day. We have thousands and thousands of people attending it, and people just running up to him asking for his autograph. But I mean,
I know, but there's a difference to be kind of famous than to be admired and respected as a Prime Minister.
No, but I mean, I'd bring Boris back tomorrow, Camilla. He's still been top in the polls.
Well, are you in communication with Boris? What's Boris thinking right now? Does he want to come back?
I mean, I'm not going to divulge private conversations, but no. I mean, Boris and Carrie are friends. I've got a lot of respect for them.
OK, so you're in regular contact with Boris?
I am in contact with them.
OK,
recently,
and what do we think his thinking is around coming back and at least campaigning in the general election?
I mean, regarding the campaigning, I mean, the stuff that was got put out there, it certainly would... I mean, the fact is, I know that Boris and Rishi haven't spoken for over a year, so Boris has not been party to any of these conversations.
OK, but there was a talk, I think somebody had suggested that Boris would be amenable to coming back and campaigning, but Rishi needed to call him first.
Well, I think you need to ask Boris that. Camilla.
But you want to see him, if he were to come back and lead the party, how could that feasibly happen? I mean, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about sort of trying to take Henley back. You know, could he run in Henley? Where could he run? How could it work?
I mean, it'd have to get past CCHQ, wouldn't he?
And would he?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be pretty awful if they didn't allow a former Prime Minister to stand. But that's what he'd have to do. But the most important thing to me, I want to see common sense politics. I want to see us roll back on net zero. I mean, the millions of pounds of spending on that, I just think is ridiculous. People are struggling and they don't want to see these vanity projects.
When you talked earlier, you mentioned St George's Day. What's your reaction to the FA and Nike and this flag on the back of the shirt? James Cleverly today has said that people should boycott this shirt, which, by the way, costs a huge amount of money. I think it's £125 to £27. But what do you think about it not being red and white?
I think it's a bit ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, it's different if it's on people's logos and things like this, but when it's, you know, our sports team, it should be the proper England flag.
Should the shirt be pulled then? Should we have a different shirt with the proper flag on it?
I think, fair play what the Foreign Secretary said, vote with your feet.
Yeah.
You know, just don't buy it.
The Home Secretary now.
Sorry, the Home Secretary,
I'm not sure David Cameron has commented, not least because he didn't quite know which football team he supported some years ago. But do you think that should fans be boycotting it then and not buying it?
I think good on them if they do, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I certainly wouldn't buy one, yeah.
And you also spoke in the week about sex education in schools. Now, let's just quote you, because I think you've expressed concerns about how young children are taught sex education. You've got a child yourself of primary school age. I don't want him and other children to learn about sex full stop, whether that's straight or gay. But you do think that sex education should exist at some point in schools?
Oh, yes, definitely.
When would you like children to be taught?
I think the first year of secondary school.
First year of secondary school. And what would you like them to be taught? Have you got objections to them being taught about heterosexual and homosexual sex? And what about transgender teaching?
I mean, I'm completely against, I think, teaching about transgender, especially at a young age. I don't want to confuse children. And I think, I mean, I've got no problem if people want to be transgender, life's short, be happy. But I think, you know, we shouldn't allow any transition in while somebody's a child. I think when they're 18, they can do what they want. People can do what they want. But no, I mean, for sex education, I mean, why, not only as a parent, I've been speaking out about this, but I have had constituents, Camilla, where they're keeping their children from school and homeschooling because they feel they want to protect the children in that way at that young age. I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of the graphics of some of the teaching materials. It's really shocking.
What, for primary school children?
Yes, this is for the later years in primary school.
Who do you think is pushing this in the background?
I think it's the civil servants. I mean, when I was in the DfE for that short 4 months, I brought it up several times, and the civil servants, the senior civil servants, said to me, we will write to every school to ensure that parents can have access, because what they're saying in the schools at the moment, they're saying that you can't have access because of copyright, but which is a load of rubbish. But when I was there, I kept pushing for it, but you needed the Secretary of States to push for it as well.
Yes.
And so that's why I asked in that debate, look, have all schools been written to about this since? And the Minister said they have, which I'm pleased, but I'm still getting it. That's not filtering to every school.
But has the Department for Education been weak on a number of these issues, not just sex education, but also this idea that some schools have agreed to call children by a different gender and not even told their parents?
Oh, it's shocking. It's terrible.
But
I mean,
that's a Department of Education problem as well as the civil servants.
Completely, but definitely. And also, I've had 2 cases in the last few years, Camilla, where we had an 8-year-old child and an 11-year-old child, 2 separate cases, where the schools was trying to push the parents to accept different genders of that child. And I went on the side of the parents because, you know, the state is not there to parent. Parents should parent, you know, as they see wish.
You've also spoken quite a lot about the rise in far-left extremism.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about extremism, we talk about far-right extremism, which, of course, is a problem. What do you mean by far-left extremism, and how prevalent do you think it is?
Well, I think it's in every institution, actually, Camilla. We see it in the civil service. We've seen it in the Home Office, where they've tried to boycott the Rwanda bill.
But you say far-left. I mean, isn't that overstating it? Others might describe it as liberalism.
No, but also look at the universities. I mean, what's happened in Leeds is awful.
You flagged real problems with pro-Palestinian protesters, making life extremely uncomfortable for Jewish students at Leeds University. Funnily enough, it's my alma mater. I went studied law at Leeds, like Keir Starmer, of all people. You've written to that Vice-Chancellor.
Yes.
What have Jewish students been experiencing?
Oh, it's horrific, Camilla. And I cried, actually, when I was speaking to them. I met with some Jewish students, and in the main building, they've been putting Palestinian flags. Students have been chanting in front of Jewish pupils from the river to the sea. They told me that this hasn't been reported to the police because some of the staff members and lecturers are saying, well, we do not want to give the university a bad name and draw attention to it, so they're not reporting it. And no university student, nobody in life full stop should be fearful to be who they are.
The Jewish chaplain there, a rabbi, basically received death threats to him and his family. He had to go into hiding. We've then had graffiti daubed on the front of Hillel House, which is the sort of centre for Jewish students recreationally. You wrote to the Vice-Chancellor and requested an urgent meeting. Has he agreed to meet with you?
Yes. I mean, I got told by their MPs that he refused to meet. So that's why I went public with my, put it on social media and tagged them in, because I thought I need to hold them to account. This is too serious. And so I've got a response back that they're happy to meet. So I'll keep you informed.
And what will you be saying? I mean, do you want to say to them, look, we shouldn't have marches through campuses?
I mean...
Or marches anywhere, maybe, briefly, Andrea.
Well, the thing is, I don't want to see... When they're trying to intimidate the Jewish students, I think, look, don't put flags there full stop unless it's our British flag or something, you know, our country flag. And they should seriously think of disciplining people if they're not behaving in a decent way.
Andrea Jenkyns, we need to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Lots more to come in the next hour. I'm going to be joined by Labour Party Chair Anneliese Dodds and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. Following his comments in the House of Lords earlier this week, could we be looking at a possible October election? You won't want to miss either of those two interviews, so don't go anywhere.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, reports suggest that Boris Johnson could make a general election comeback for the Tories, with the former Prime Minister expected to campaign for the Conservatives in red wall seats, although not stand in one himself.
Yes, he wants to take the fight to Keir Starmer. So, GB News East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been in Bassett Law asking locals whether they want to see Boris make a comeback.
I actually used to like Boris Johnson, but he let me down with COVID, and so therefore I won't be voting Conservative anymore. I did do, but not anymore.
Not for me and anybody else here, because from day one he's been a liar all along. Don't vote for him. Stick with Labour.
I like Boris Johnson, to be honest with you, and I think it could do with a boost for Conservatives. I've always been a Labour voter myself, but no, I went to Conservative.
Personally, not for me, no. He's not done anything to make any arrangements to make this town better.
When he was in charge of the Conservative Party, all he thought about was the upper class, not the working class, because he was telling everybody to stay at home during COVID, and what did he do? He had an house party.
Well, there you go, the views of the people of Bassett Law. Not keen
He was telling
overall.
people to stay at home. There's no suggestion he didn't stay at home.
Well, no. But I guess there's mixed reviews on whether Boris Johnson's to make a comeback. I guess the idea is that he'll appeal to red wall voters far more than Rishi Sunak. So if they can use him up there, then maybe he'll help them out. And I think they want to get David Cameron to campaign in the blue wall, in the Shires, because he goes down well there.
Allies of Boris Johnson have been pouring cold water on this report, of course. Nadine Dorries tweeting earlier today that Rishi and Boris actually haven't spoken in the last year.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. So much more to come in the next hour. I'm going to be joined by Labour Party Chair Anneliese Dodds, and I'll be speaking to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. But first, here's the news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. We start with some breaking news. 3 young siblings reported missing from Gloucestershire have been found safe and well. Officers had been concerned for the welfare of 3-year-old Polly, 5-year-old Jolene and 8-year-old Betsy. They went missing after last being seen with their mother on Friday. Well, they have now been found. A woman's been arrested on suspicion of child neglect in connection with the incident and remains in police custody. The Prince and Princess of Wales have said they're enormously touched by the kind messages of support. Catherine announced her cancer diagnosis on Friday and revealed she started preventative chemotherapy. A statement from Kensington Palace also said the couple are grateful the public understand their request for privacy. Former royal butler Grant Harold told GB News Catherine's bravery has the potential to help many others.
what's really interesting is the fact that the King has spoken openly and now she's done the same. This is very unusual because historically royals did not discuss health issues. As we know with the late Queen and the late Prince Philip, this was a no-go area. And here we've got a very modern royal family where they're actually openly talking about this, which is great because it's raising, it's not, I'm going to say raising awareness, it's getting people talking about it, probably hopefully getting people to go and get themselves checked. And I think it's really important what she's done, speaking about it, and I really admire it.
Russians are observing a national day of mourning after at least 133 people were killed in a terror attack on Friday. People have been lighting candles and laying flowers at the concert hall on the outskirts of Moscow, where 4 men with automatic weapons opened fire in a packed auditorium. Flags have been lowered to half-mast, events cancelled, and advertising taken off state TV, with some countries lighting up landmarks in solidarity. President Putin has pointed to Ukrainian involvement, despite Islamic State claiming responsibility, which is backed up by US intelligence. Ukraine has denied any involvement. Well, the White House condemned the attack as heinous and described Islamic State as a common terrorist enemy that must be defeated. Meanwhile, Ukraine's been hit by a series of Russian missile strikes overnight. Sirens in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, as residents sought shelter in subway stations. Ukrainian authorities say they shot down 18 missiles and 25 drones over the capital. Dozens of Russian missiles targeted critical infrastructure in the western region of Lviv, amid reports one crossed the border into Polish airspace, a NATO member. The whole of Ukraine has been placed on alert. At least 10,000 civilians have been killed in the country since Russia's invasion. Well, for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's back to Camilla.
Thank you, Aaron. Still lots more to come on today's show. In just a minute, I'm going to be joined by Labour Party Chair Anneliese Dodds. As Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities, can she clarify Labour's definition of a woman once and for all? I'll also be speaking to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Is he out of touch with the everyday Brit following his recent comments that earning £100,000 in Surrey is not a huge salary? Author and historian Sir Anthony Selden will be here in the studio giving us his 2 pennyworth on whether we can expect a Boris Johnson comeback. And I'll be joined later by former Press Secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Elsa Anderson, for her thoughts on the Princess of Wales's cancer diagnosis and what it means for the royal family. But first, I'm delighted to be joined by Anneliese Dodds, who's the Labour Party Chair and MP for Oxford East. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. First of all, what was your reaction to the Princess of Wales's cancer announcement on Friday afternoon?
Good morning. Well, of course, it's really awful to hear that news, very distressing news, but I think seeing that video really brought home, actually, that Her Highness is quite an incredible person. She's really sent out a message of hope and optimism, and I know that for people facing similar circumstances, it really must have been a message that was very, very important for them as well, knowing that, as she put it, they are not alone.
As you know, she's faced a lot of criticism on social media, particularly. There's been a lot of trolling. First of all, should she be left alone? And second of all, what would Labour do to clean up the internet, particularly when it comes to anonymous trolls?
Well, there's been some really lurid speculation about Her Highness, of course, on social media. It must have been extremely distressing to her at such an incredibly difficult time. It would be difficult for anyone, but going through something like that in the full glaze of publicity, I think must be incredibly hard. We do think that more needs to be done, particularly when it comes to the kind of online abuse that we see so repeatedly directed, a lot of the time actually towards women, towards ethnic minority people. We need to be getting more of a grip on this. We think the internet companies need to be doing more. They're highly profitable companies. They do need to be getting more of a grip on this.
Yeah, do you think that actually people shouldn't be allowed to be posting on websites like X if they're anonymous?
Well, that question has come up, of course, repeatedly, but you also see people who are very happy to be identified, who've been propagating, in some cases, very extreme views, you know, what would actually contravene UK law, and we've not seen quick enough action being taken by X. In fact, Yvette Cooper, who's Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, she revealed just a few days ago many, many different messages that were posted on X that would have broken, in fact, our hate crime and extremism provisions within the UK, and action had not been taken. So, you know, really these companies have got to get far more of a grip, and we've been calling on government to push them to do so as well.
Well, I don't know whether it's by accident, Miss Dodds, but I can see you sporting the colours of red and white there amid this ongoing row about the England shirt. I know Keir Starmer has suggested that the flag should be changed. Obviously, it's not in red and white. It's a kind of multicoloured version. We've heard from Home Secretary James Cleverly this morning saying he thinks fans should boycott this shirt. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if Keir was going to be wearing it anyway. I think most of us feel that there's nothing wrong with the St George's Cross, that that's what they should have been sticking with. But I have to say, when it comes to football shirts, there'll be lots of parents watching this, knowing quite how extraordinarily expensive it is to get the kits for their kids, how there's lots of different ones now, but also how, if you're a women's football fan, which I am, thinking it was a bit of a disgrace that we didn't get a replica kit, of course, for the England goalie, Mary Earps, at the time of the tremendous success of that women's team. So, you know, I think it would be really good if this is focused on more carefully, because, you know, football is so important to lots of people, me included. It's really important that people can support their teams in an appropriate way and really show that backing that they have for, especially for our England teams, both men and women as well.
So should they recall this shirt and maybe produce a cheaper one? 125 quid's not affordable for people, is it, in a cost of living crisis?
It's incredibly expensive, and actually if you look at the children's kits, for example, if you have the kids' names put on the back of them, my understanding is it's even more than that from what I've heard in the media. So this is very expensive. I would like to certainly see the companies looking at this, because we want our kids to get excited about football. We want them to then be going out and playing on the playing field, you know, in the park, having that kickabout, getting fit. Football's incredibly important for us in the UK and other sports too, and everything that we can do to encourage that, I think, is important.
Now, you're the Shadow Women and Equalities Minister. I wondered what you think of Rachel Reeves, your Labour colleague, the Shadow Chancellor, trying to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher. Is Margaret Thatcher the kind of woman that Labour want to emulate?
I think what Rachel said was that we're at a turning point, and that's absolutely right. And you don't have to agree with everything that Margaret Thatcher did, I certainly don't, to actually appreciate the fact that she did turn our country in a particular direction, as I say, in my view, in often the wrong direction, but she did turn our country in a particular direction. She had a particular political drive. What have we had over the last few years? Well, actually, we've had 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 12 different failing plans for growth. No plan, no drive, no direction.
But
and
it's a bit
under
rich,
Labour,
isn't it?
ultimately, with Rachel, you would have that direction.
It's a bit rich, isn't it, for Labour to now be eulogising Margaret Thatcher, when in the past the left have absolutely vilified her?
I think that's a misunderstanding. What Rachel has said is that at the time of Thatcher, there was that inflection point, that turn towards a different political direction. It doesn't mean that she agreed with the political direction that was then taken, but there was a political drive for a different Britain. I would say, and I'm sure, and I know that Rachel agrees, in many ways that actually turned our country, sadly, in the wrong direction. Now, the difference we've had with recent Conservative governments, it has been no drive, no direction, no plan, chopping and changing all of the time, and I'm afraid our country has suffered as a result of that.
Although some could say that Labour don't have a plan for paying for your pledge to decarbonise by 2030. What is the plan? Because we're yet to find out how on earth this is going to be funded.
Well, we've set all of that out in detail. First of all, we would make sure that there are the regulatory changes that we need. We would deliver a once-in-a-generation overhaul of the planning system. You know, it currently takes in the UK far longer than in other countries to make sure that there's planning permission for example, onshore wind.
How would you pay for it, though, Ms.
by
Dodds?
the current government, other critical infrastructure. Well, this has always been a partnership between the private sector and government as well. The problem is, however, we've not had government actually playing their part because they've made a mess of these rules, I'm afraid. They've got more and more complicated. That's why Labour would be delivering that reform.
I know, but we don't know how you're going to pay for it.
A National Sovereign Wealth Fund. Well,
will taxes go up? Will spending go up?
So that was about regulation, what I just talked about, which is important. That's not to do with public spending. It's a different area of government activity. We have set out plans, for example, for a National Sovereign Wealth Fund. Now, that would be partly by plugging the holes in the windfall tax that the government sadly has left after they belatedly introduced that tax. But, you know, there's a big difference, Camilla, between what Labour is setting out, especially on taxation, and what we're seeing under the Conservatives. We've seen taxes going up 25 times under the Conservatives.
So they'll come down under Labour.
Households are going to be paying. Well, our instinct is always to make sure that working people are not paying the price for government mistakes. That's what's happened, I'm afraid, under the Conservatives. So, of course, our approach would always be to try and reduce that impact on working people. We've seen the opposite, I'm afraid, under recent Conservative governments.
OK. Very, very briefly, Ms Dodds, you say you believe in easier self-identification, gender self-identification, but also in protecting women's spaces. Isn't that rather oxymoronic?
Quite the opposite. We believe that it's possible to deliver change to the gender recognition certification regime. And sorry for viewers who haven't followed this in detail. It's a rather technical area, but currently there's a huge amount of detail that people have to provide. For example, if they've had some medical change, if they've had surgery, for example, to their bodies, they have to provide detail of every aspect of that. If they haven't, they don't have to provide that information at all. We believe it's possible to deliver those changes in a way that still commands public support. We're confident that we can deliver that in the changes that we've set out, because just as you said, Camilla, it is important that we can protect single-sex spaces, but we also need to treat trans people with dignity as well. We can do both at the same time.
Anneliese Dodds, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Now, up next, I'm going to be speaking to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Why haven't the Tories had a spring budget bounce? Stay tuned.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Earlier on, I had the pleasure of sitting down with the Chancellor. His recent budget didn't quite have the effect he might have hoped for. Does he still have a few tricks left up his sleeve to entice voters? I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Lovely to see you again, Chancellor, so soon.
Good morning, Camilla.
Can we start? Do you mind if I ask you a personal question to begin with? Because I know cancer is something that's affected your family very deeply. You've lost your parents to cancer last year. You lost your beloved brother, Charlie. And I know you're running a London Marathon to raise money for the Royal Surrey Cancer Centre. And you've had your own cancer scare. So what was your reaction to the Princess of Wales's news?
Well, I think I had a lump in my throat like most people did because, first of all, I think your heart goes out to anyone who's going through that. But I think the thing that really struck a chord was her talking about how difficult it was to talk to her own children. And I think that, most families do sadly have to face a cancer scare at some stage or another. And that's actually the most difficult thing of all. How do you tell your kids what's going on so that they are in the picture, but not over scared? And she's obviously been wrestling with that. And I think when she talked about that openly, which is a very brave thing to do, I think she connected with a lot of us.
Would your piece of advice to them then be to be as open as possible with the children?
I think it's not really for me to give advice to any other family because everyone is different. You've got kids, I've got kids. They're always smarter than you think they are. They do figure out what's going on. But it's also very, very scary. And so I think you just have to find a way, as she shared with the country, of giving them the hope that they need in situations like this.
Well, of course, we wish you well with your marathon. By the way, I know you're in the middle of training at the moment and on top of a very, very busy job. Let's talk about the budget then. I mean, are you happy with how it landed? Because the commentary has been that it hasn't really moved the dial, that Rishi Sunak and the Tories are still well behind in the polls, so it hasn't had the boost that you might have hoped.
Well, politicians always like to do well in the polls, but the job of a Chancellor is to do the right thing for the economy. And I think what we've seen this week after the budget, inflation going down to 3.4%, that shows that the difficult decisions that I took when I became Chancellor 18 months ago, really horrible decisions because we had inflation at over 11%. At that period, it wasn't just inflation, but people were very worried about living standards, and the Office for Budget Responsibility said they would fall by 2% in the following year. They've actually risen. So I think the economy is in much better shape than it might have been. And I think when it comes to the election, the real poll that politicians always say the only poll that really matters is the election, that's really a choice about the future. And when it comes to things like tax, what the Conservatives say is, yes, we had to put them up, but we think they should come down. We've made a start. We want to go further. Labour Party, Rachel Reeves, in her lecture this week, over an hour, she didn't mention once bringing down the tax burden.
Well, when should they come down? Because you're running out of time. I mean, will there be another fiscal event between now and the election?
I think that depends when the election is. And
you've suggested it might be in October.
Well, that's always been my working assumption, the Prime Minister's working assumption. So there would potentially be time for another one, but you can't say at this stage whether you're going to have the room to cut taxes further because lots of things can change in the economy between now and then. But we do want people to know that, yes, we want to bring the tax burden down. And I think the important thing for GB News viewers is this isn't just about putting money in people's pockets, although people have been finding things tough. If you look around the world, places like North America and Asia with lower taxes grow faster. And if we want to be a dynamic economy, we don't want to go into that slow growth pattern that you so often get in countries where the tax burden has been hiked up.
But then the obvious question would be, why weren't you more radical with the budget? You talked about this idea of double taxation with income tax and national insurance. I was listening to you in the chamber thinking, my goodness me, it's going to scrap national insurance. You haven't gone that far, but afterwards you briefed that you might. I appreciate there's been the cut to national insurance, but you haven't cut income tax, and the tax bands remain frozen, so that we have this situation with thousands and thousands more people being fiscally dragged into higher tax rate bands. So you talk a good game when it comes to cutting tax, but you haven't actually cut tax, at least not income tax anyway.
Well, let's cut to the quick of this. I've been very honest with you, I think, in our last interview, that yes, we put taxes up after the pandemic and the energy shock, and I haven't brought them all the way down to where they were before. And so you do have things like fiscal drag, but we have made a start, and 4p off national insurance for people in work. That'll be worth about £900 in the coming year. That's a start. But why didn't I go further, which is your question? With public finances where they are, the only way I could have gone further would have been to increase borrowing to fund tax cuts. And that wouldn't have been a real tax cut, because that would have been basically saying we're going to increase borrowing, we're going to send the bill to future generations, but it's not a real tax cut because someone else is picking up the tab. So I went as far as I could possibly go responsibly.
Although you talk about cutting tax, but if you look at the forecast by the OBR and indeed the IFS, they suggest that we're still going to be paying more tax in 5 years' time anyway, because of fiscal drag.
Well, what their numbers show, actually, is that because of the decisions I've taken, tax will be about 0.6% of a proportion of GDP lower than it would have been. And that includes, by the way, the tax rises that I did in the autumn statement 18 months ago. So put it all together, and actually we have started to reduce taxes from where they were going to be. But yes, I would like to bring the absolute levels of tax down, absolutely. And I've started on that path.
Would you like to scrap NI completely?
Yes, I would like employees.
When can you imagine being able to do that? If you offered that, for instance, in a fiscal event before the election, which would obviously be good electioneering, when would that feasibly be able to take place?
Well, I can't responsibly promise a date because it depends on all sorts of things, including, what Putin does in Ukraine and international energy prices. But what I can say is that for 2 fiscal events in a row, for the autumn statement and the budget, I have been able to make a significant cut in personal taxation without increasing borrowing, without risking our public services. And a Conservative government will go further because we've shown we can do it, and we'll continue on that journey.
Let's talk about a little bit of controversy that was caused by you in the week talking to somebody about a lady in Godalming talking about the eligibility for the government's childcare offer, and you made the point about one person earning over 100 grand a year, and you said that that was, quotes, not a huge salary in our area if you have a mortgage to pay. You're talking about being an MP in Surrey. 100 grand isn't a large amount of money to earn?
Well, I was talking to a lady who was explained to me the average house prices in that part of the world, £670,000. If you've got a mortgage, if you're paying childcare, what looks like a very high salary doesn't go as far as you might think it would. And but that's under 14 years of Tory rule, isn't it? I mean, 100 grand is what, 4 times more or less the average salary in this country. So that's a hell of a lot of money to earn, isn't it? Why are people on 100 grand feeling that they don't have enough money under a Conservative government? Well, sorry, I've got a cough. The reason is because we've been through a very difficult period. We've had a pandemic, we've had an energy crisis, and by the way, it's not just people on that salary, it's people on all salaries. If you look at the average salary in this country, £35,000, they have been feeling the pinch. And those people will see their tax bills go down by £900 this year. If you look at people on an even lower salary, the lowest legally payable salary, the national living wage, because I've increased that to £11.44, they will see if they're working full-time, their income go up by £1,800. So that's the difference. You know, Conservative government says that people at all parts of the income spectrum are finding life tough. We want to relieve that pressure. We're honest, we can't do it overnight, but we're making a start.
But isn't there a kind of cake-and-eat-it scenario for the government here in that you claim sort of plaudits for bringing inflation down, but you don't take responsibility for it having gone up in the first place?
Well, with respect, it's because it wasn't us, it was because of what Putin did in Ukraine that pushed up global energy prices. I mean, I will take responsibility for lots of things that we've got wrong, but not the invasion of Ukraine.
If global energy prices have come down, and obviously the cost of living crisis has improved generally across the whole of the sort of global spectrum, then the idea of you personally claiming responsibility for these numbers coming down probably seems a bit disingenuous.
Well, I think you've talked to independent economists. They would say that the very difficult decisions I took in the autumn statement of 2022, when just after I'd become Chancellor, which did see those taxes going up, which did see public spending being cut, that meant that we had an environment where the Bank of England could focus on bringing down inflation with interest rates. And what economists say is fiscal and monetary policy needs to work together. And that's what I did. So I did have to play my part. Of course, it wasn't just me.
Final question on Putin, just because you mentioned him. This terror attack in Moscow, are you worried now that the Russian president is going to use this to sort of weaponise further action against Ukraine? We've seen he's already blamed Ukraine, seemingly erroneously, for this attack.
Well, we know that we can't believe a word that man says. And, you know, it's no surprise that he's trying to weaponise what happened. What I would say is that any innocent person, even if it's in Russia, a country whose government we disapprove of so strongly, it is a tragedy. And we are very lucky in this country that we have brilliant intelligence agencies, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, who managed to stop a lot of these attacks before they happen. But, you know, our hearts go out to the families who've lost loved ones and what happened in Russia, but that doesn't mean we have to believe a word Putin says.
Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Camilla.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain compared to average incomes has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you?
No,
because you're profiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin...
Have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system and say, it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious...
we're being punished.
No, well, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Oh, you're good, as long as it's not whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help the old. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in two departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties that don't build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. I'm joined now by author, historian and political biographer Sir Anthony Selden. Sir Anthony, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for coming in. Been a lot of news, hasn't there? What was your reaction to the Princess of Wales announcing that she had cancer on Friday night?
Well, incredibly upset. I mean, it's very sad, that poor family, the children. And she is just the most popular figure in the royal family, just edging Prince William, is also extremely popular. I think most people would be saddened and shocked. But I don't think the royal family is in crisis because none of the conditions for a royal family crisis exist at the moment. It's just very sad to have both the king and now her ill with this terrible disease. And let's hope they recover soon. But it's not a crisis.
Hopefully they'll be taking comfort from each other and going through treatment at the same time. I appreciate what you're saying about it not being crisis, but doesn't the monarchy appear to have been too slimmed down? I mean, it does seem as if, and I appreciate, actually, even before these health problems, you know, we're starting to look a bit too thin on the ground in the absence of Harry and Meghan and indeed the Duke of York, like him or loathe him.
I think, Camilla, you love history, and in history, the idea of a wider royal family really hasn't been there. The spotlight has just been on the monarch and on the spouse, and the principal interest in the spouse has been the person who's going to secure the royal succession. The moments of real crisis have been when we haven't known who the successor is going to be. Now the succession is secure into the 22nd century, at least, and so there's not that crisis. But the notion of a wider royal family is relatively new. And, you know, look, let's hope that the king recovers soon. I mean, he is hyperactive, you know that.
Yes.
He has so many interests. He is a workaholic. Even if he can't recover to that same extent, he'll be out there as soon as his doctors say that he can. And so will she. I mean, she loves the work, and how very blessed, really, the royal family, but the country are to have such a popular, such a public-spirited, such a admirable person as the Princess.
Absolutely. We wish her the very best with her treatment.
So no crisis, just a lot of sadness and worry, but let's take them at their word that they'll soon be through it.
Well, let's talk about somewhere where there is a crisis, the Tory party.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my goodness. Well, succession planning there. I mean, what are your predictions for the election and who comes after Rishi Sunak? Because you've obviously written books about recent successive prime ministers, and you've been quite busy over the course of the last few years because the Tories have obviously committed regicide on more than one occasion. But your prediction for the election, first of all, and then for Rishi Sunak's replacement, Sir Anthony?
So, Labour are likely to win. Now, the polls narrow the closer you get to a general election. We know that. So the question is, how much will they narrow? At the moment, the likelihood of a Tory victory is slim, even with a new leader, if the party does that, which I think history would show would be a mistake. So it will be a Labour victory with perhaps a majority of 50 to 100 is a good kind of guess at the moment. Who will take over from Rishi Sunak? My guess is whoever takes over after that election defeat, if indeed it waits that long, will not be the next Tory Prime Minister. the person who takes over is rarely the person who then goes on.
Yes.
But there'll be somebody who's got to rebuild the Tory party. I mean, what on earth does the Tory party believe in now?
Good question.
I mean, it created Brexit, but it didn't know what to do with Brexit. If you look back over the last 14 years, it's been full of ministerial churn, inconsistency. It's very hard to find the Tory party digging deep into its core values and providing the kind of consistency of purpose and indeed the moral leadership that we rightly expect from the Tory party. So it has been, I'm afraid to say, a pretty unhappy period of Tory party rule compared to 1951 to 64 or 1979 to 1997 under Thatcher and Major. It just simply doesn't compare to that period or indeed earlier periods of Tory government.
So what do you make of talk then of comebacks, either by David Cameron, who is now being touted potentially as a future Tory leader again, and of course your old friend Boris Johnson?
So I don't think that it would be wise. I think history would show that it's not wise for a party to have a new leader. Now, that did happen in 1955, where Anthony Eden took over the month before a general election, and the Tories did very well in that election. So there is a bit of history there. But I think after so much churn, it would look poor. I think David Cameron was technically a very proficient Prime Minister. I think also, not everyone agrees, obviously, that Rishi Sunak is the best Prime Minister, technically, since David Cameron. But I think that he could have perhaps done more, and with Jeremy Hunt. I mean, that's a grown-up team. But the conditions were so adverse, and I think perhaps more could have been done to have lowered expectations of what could be achieved by anyone taking over from Liz Truss, because really their room for manoeuvre was remarkably slight. And I think had they made it clear that they were trying to govern in the interests of the country with a more consistent, thought-through policy, that would have been helpful. But look, I think he's done probably as well. I think history will say that he's done probably as well as any leader could do. You do not want to come in as a Prime Minister and be a tail-end Charlie taking over at the end of a long period of one-party rule.
And your thoughts on a Boris Johnson comeback? I mean, I went to your lecture at the Hampstead Synagogue and you said he was the worst Prime Minister in British history.
I think he had a lot of promise. He had many, or some to many, of the attributes that great prime ministers need. He's very good at creating a sense of momentum, a sense of excitement. I think he fell down as prime minister. He fell down because he didn't have the same strong team that he had round him when he was in City Hall for those 8 years.
So is he this knight in shining armour for the Tory?
I think that he isn't, and I think it would be a mistake for the Tory party. But look, it's down to them, and if they want to make that, then I think that it would. I think it's unlikely to come back well, because he's unlikely to be any better second time round. It's a shame, because Boris Johnson could have been, as I argued before he became Prime Minister, he had the potential and the opportunity to be a significant Prime Minister. The great Prime Ministers in history are often there at times of big historical moments. There was obviously the epidemic. There was the chance to really make something of Brexit. And then there was the Ukraine war, which he did well at. But he could have seized those opportunities more. I think that history will say that he did fall short and didn't provide the kind of leadership that we should expect from a Prime Minister.
You're currently working on your Truss at 10 book, which is out in September. I mean, who do you blame more for the demise of the Tories, Truss or Johnson?
Well, I think in different ways. I think that that if you look at the polling, that she did a lot of damage to the Tory party's support, whereas Boris Johnson, the popularity of the party, was quite high when he left. I think in terms of the economy, has done significant ongoing damage. But, again, it's a puzzle. She came to office with more experience of how to be a minister than any prime minister in 30 years. And she had a plan, which was a good growth plan.
Yes.
But it wasn't, she didn't roll the pitch. She said that Margaret Thatcher was her great hero, but Margaret Thatcher bided her time for 2 years. She rolled the pitch. She got people behind her before going in. Liz Truss was mesmerised by the fact there'd be a general election in 18 months and she had to get in there very early, and she simply moved too quickly and without enough premeditation.
Can I ask you to put your headmasterly mortarboard on just for my final question? You obviously took over Epsom College after the tragic death of former head teacher Emma Patterson. I just wondered, how are the students, how are the teachers, how's it going at Epsom?
So Epsom College in Surrey is a wonderful school. I've been very, very proud to have been the head for 18 months. I didn't think I've ever enjoyed or felt that a job has been more worthwhile than that. I think more generally, I think mental health of young people has taken a hit, and their ability to think through the skills that they're going to need for the workplace has taken a hit in schools at large. And, you know, you can be very good at exams, but that's a long way short of being prepared for the job market or even to cope at university. So I think that we need to be thinking more in general about young people and how to give them resilience and character skills and determination to allow them to flourish in life.
Post-COVID coping strategies, perhaps?
Absolutely, Camilla.
Sir Anthony, will you come back and tell us about the book once it's out? Trust at 10's coming out, I believe, in September.
Thank you very much. I would love to do that.
OK. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you. Well, up next, I'm going to be speaking to my fellow GB News host, Michael Portillo, and reflecting on the Princess of Wales's cancer diagnosis with somebody who knows the royals very well, the late Queen's former press secretary, Elsa Anderson. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Sunday promises to be a much quieter day weather-wise across the UK than on Saturday, drier, brighter and less blustery too. There are still one or two showers around today, particularly toward the north of Scotland. Still wintry across the hilltops there, but elsewhere the winds, as I say, are much lighter, more in the way of sunshine around, any showers very isolated, and with that extra bit of sunshine and the winds being that much lighter too, it should feel a bit warmer than on Saturday. Temperatures peaking in the south and southeast at around about 12 or 13 Celsius, 13 there in London is 55 in Fahrenheit, nearer average towards the north at 8 to 11 Celsius. As we go through the evening, we'll start to see some outbreaks of rain working their way in from the west, pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland and other westernmost areas, whereas towards the north and east, as we go through Sunday night, we'll hold on to some clearer conditions. Here it will turn quite chilly, at least for a time, because there's a touch of frost here, whereas out towards the west, that cloud, wind and rain will start to lift temperatures, and by the morning on Monday, temperatures in Belfast, for example, will be around 6 Celsius, 43 in Fahrenheit. That sets the scene for a bit of an east-west split in our weather on Monday. Wet at times, fairly blustery conditions developing out towards the west. Some quite heavy bursts of rain at times. We do hold on to sunnier skies towards the north and east, with some cloud gradually pushing in there as we go through the day from the west. But in the best of that sunshine, and with the wind staying fairly light out towards the east, temperatures will climb into double figures, but feeling cooler with that wind and rain out towards the west. That's it. See you soon. Bye-bye.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Michael Portillo joins me now. Michael, what's on your show at 11?
Good morning, Camilla. I'm going to be asking whether media companies have a responsibility to control misinformation, the sort of misinformation that is being put out about the Princess of Wales. In Hong Kong, there's a tremendous crackdown on liberty and free speech. I'm going to be talking to one of the democracy campaigners who now lives in Britain and talking about the way in which the Chinese seek to control people even living in the United Kingdom. We'll be looking back 80 years to the Great Escape and asking what was the truth about that extraordinary event when hundreds of Allied prisoners escaped from Stalag Luft No. 3. And Stefan Kyriazis, who always does theatre reviews for me, will be taking us to the ballet.
Brilliant. Sounds fantastic, Michael. We look forward to that at 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, in just a minute, I'm going to be speaking to the former royal aide, Ailsa Anderson, about the Princess of Wales's courageous video message announcing she has cancer. But first, here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Sunday promises to be a much quieter day weather-wise across the UK than on Saturday. Drier, brighter and less blustery too. There are still 1 or 2 showers around today, particularly toward the north of Scotland. Still wintry across the hilltops there, but elsewhere the winds, as I say, are much lighter, more in the way of sunshine around. Any showers very isolated, and with that extra bit of sunshine and the winds being that much lighter too, it should feel a bit warmer than on Saturday. Temperatures peaking in the south and southeast at around about 12 or 13 Celsius. 13 there in London is 55 in Fahrenheit. Nearer average towards the north at 8 to 11 Celsius. As we go through the evening, we'll start to see some outbreaks of rain working their way in from the west, pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland and other westernmost areas, whereas towards the north and east, as we go through Sunday night, we'll hold on to some clearer conditions. Here it will turn quite chilly, at least for a time, because there's a touch of frost here, whereas out towards the west, that cloud, wind and rain will start to lift temperatures, and by the morning on Monday, temperatures in Belfast, for example, will be around 6 Celsius, 43 in Fahrenheit. That sets the scene for a bit of an east-west split in our weather on Monday. Wet at times, fairly blustery conditions developing out towards the west. Some quite heavy bursts of rain at times. We do hold on to sunnier skies towards the north and east, with some cloud gradually pushing in there as we go through the day from the west. But in the best of that sunshine, and with the wind staying fairly light out towards the east, temperatures will climb into double figures, but feeling cooler with that wind and rain out towards the west. That's it. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, as promised, I'm joined now by the former Press Secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Ailsa Anderson. Thank you for joining me today in the studio. What was your reaction to the news?
Oh, my golly, I can't think of anyone who would not have been incredibly moved by that. I mean, she showed her vulnerability. It was genuine, it was honest, it was heartfelt. Honestly, it genuinely brought me to tears. It really was. It was amazing.
I mean, I was so shocked because obviously we knew she had been very unwell. We knew she had had the serious surgery. But to find out 2 senior members of the royal family have cancer and are going through treatment at the same time, I mean, obviously we consider them to be a family firm, but they're also a family at the end of the day. Your heart goes out particularly to the Prince of Wales, his father and his wife going through this.
Absolutely. But, you know, 1 in 2 people in the UK get diagnosed with cancer. There are 3 million people living with it. And I think those people and everyone actually can resonate with her message. You know, they are members of the royal family, but cancer's a great leveller. Yes. And you can be a prince or a pauper, and you know, it doesn't discriminate.
Also, you can relate to them particularly and relate to her in talking about having to tell the children.
I know.
As a mum.
I know. Well, you've got young children. I've got young children. And actually to break it to them, and they're young, I think the timing was very, very good. You know, they broadcasted it the day that the children were breaking up for their Easter holidays, so they're not going to be questioned at school. So they're going to be afforded, God willing, a bit of sort of peace and privacy while they process this information. And I'm sure they've got lots and lots of questions to ask their parents.
Of course. And actually that timing, I mean, they said that they've held back. Obviously, she seems to have found out that it was cancer after the operation. We think that's the reason why Prince William pulled out of the memorial service to King Constantine of Greece at the last minute. He cited personal reasons. We now know, obviously, that they got this devastating news. Then there's a bit of a gap while they gather their thoughts. She says in the message, we needed time to process such shocking news, but also to tell the children. It's difficult for the palace, though, to manage this situation where the void ended up being filled by conspiracy theorists and trolls online, just with your PR hat on, because things have changed a bit since you were in the royal household.
Yeah.
This is almost impossible to manage, isn't it?
It is, very much so. And I do think in this age of social media, you're always going to have those conspiracy theorists, and you can do everything you can, but you'll still have that hopefully small minority who won't believe anything. Yeah. And I'm sure, like you, I've read some awful things on social media about her, about why she hasn't been seen in public. And it's bad enough having to cope with a major operation and then find out that you've actually got cancer and you're going to be treated for cancer. But to have this background noise of these vile trolls on social media making up all sorts of ridiculous stories about you, which your friends are reading, your family are reading, I mean, it just piles on the pressure for you.
I mean, the response to that was obviously the Mothering Day photograph. And I mean, it was a beautiful photograph. There's then a controversy over whether it was edited or not. The palace clearly decided to put that image out to try and silence some of the critics who were constantly asking, where's Kate? People like you and me were saying, we know where she is. She's recovering from major surgery at home in Windsor. But does the palace have to be careful here not to be too reactive to people who are basically just causing trouble online?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you've just got to hold your nerve.
Yeah.
Because if you sort of crack open that door, then people want it to be pushed right wide open.
Yes.
So, and you've set a precedent. So sometimes it is, hold your nerve, keep strong, keep calm and carry on, as the Queen would say.
Well, never complain, never explain.
Yeah,
sometimes it's better just to say nothing.
Totally.
And keep a sort of stiff upper lip.
Yeah. But it's hard because it's relentless. That public scrutiny is absolutely relentless. So it is very hard to say nothing.
Well, I think the media has to take some responsibility as well, because I mean, I've taken a bit of stick over the weekend. People saying, you're saying leave her alone, but the media has been part of the feeding frenzy. I would say that, of course, there's a legitimate right for newspapers to report actual news events, but we should be careful not to be stoking some of the stuff online by writing about it. You often see articles, somebody said on X, somebody said on Facebook. Well, who cares? These people aren't experts.
I know, absolutely. But, of course, with big major royal stories, you have all sorts of so-called experts coming out of the woodwork talking about it. I think going forward, let her have some peace, let her have some privacy, let the family have some privacy, she can recuperate.
The palace shouldn't be providing a running commentary.
No, absolutely not. And we never did. When the late Queen was unwell, or Prince Philip, we always say we're not going to provide a day-to-day commentary on their condition.
Just tell us, because you work with them, obviously, at very close quarters, what's the Princess of Wales actually like? Somebody commented earlier, that's the first time I've really seen her speak at length. I mean, obviously, people don't cover the everyday jobs that I see. I've seen her speak at lecterns and I've seen her interact with people on jobs. She's always struck me to be exactly as she seems, frankly, on screen. She's very poised. But what's she like one-to-one?
She's very poised. She's very genuine. I've met her on numerous occasions. Warm, chatty, kind. I suppose you'd expect me to say that anyway, but genuinely.
No, I think I haven't really heard that many people ever say a bad word about her, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, she came around to our press office when I think she was just pregnant with Prince George, and she chatted to all the members of the team. She had a genuine interest. And that wasn't a public engagement. That was just chatting to staff members at Buckingham Palace. Yeah. So she didn't have to put on an act. No. She just came in and chatted to us. That's really kind. And also to say thank you to members of staff who support her in her work.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think she's been renowned, hasn't she, within the household for being pretty down to earth, being good with staff. Yeah. We can tell they've had members of their own private household, their housekeeper, their nanny, that they've had for years and years and years. Absolutely. Which is always a sign. We used to say that about Prince Philip, who had the same members of staff literally for half a century.
I know, absolutely. Some of them were older than him.
Well, I'm not sure if they, maybe a couple of them were. When it comes to how the royals cope with this, you will have heard, I think, Sir Anthony Selden in the studio earlier saying this isn't a crisis for the monarchy. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely, totally agree with that. It's not a crisis. Yeah, a crisis is an abdication.
Yes.
A crisis is not knowing the line of succession. This is a bump in the road. This is not a major earthquake, in my opinion. You've got two senior members of the royal family who are ill, who are being treated for cancer. But hopefully this is a blip, and going forward they will recuperate. and carry on doing the amazing work that they do.
I mean, it has been remarkable that Prince William still has been carrying out the engagements,
Absolutely.
knowing what's been going on.
Yeah.
Let's also have a word about Queen Camilla, because
Amazing.
she's 76 years old. I mean, obviously, before marrying into the royal family, she's an ordinary mother and housewife living a fairly quiet life. She gets thrust into the limelight well beyond retirement age. I think she's played a bit of a blinder, to be honest. I mean, it seems as if she's now, who would have thought it, 20 years ago, holding the fort.
I know. And also, the media coverage about her has been extraordinary. Again, going back 20, 30 years ago, she was, it was vitriolic. Now she can't put a foot wrong, which is amazing. And we saw her in Northern Ireland last week carrying out engagements. She's incredibly popular, and I haven't seen a bad word written about her.
I know, it's extraordinary. Having said that, does it look like there are too few royals to go around at the moment? Has it been slimmed down too much? Should we, Elsa, brace yourself, create roles in working royal life for the likes of Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, maybe even say to Zara and Mike Tyndall, look, you're popular in the royal family, come and work for the firm.
Yeah, they are very popular. I think the balance is right at the moment. I think, obviously, we have two members of the royal family out of action, but they will come back into the fold again. The King is still carrying out certain engagements. I mean, he's having his weekly audience with the Prime Minister. We've seen him meet Commonwealth people. So he is still undertaking some engagements. I'm sure he's still doing his red boxes. And the Princess of Wales will come back. What I would like to say about her again is just, I think the wonderful thing is the support of her family, not only her husband,
the Middletons,
but the Middletons,
as well as
and
the
reading James Middleton's tweet.
Yes, we have a mountain to climb together. It was a lovely
How amazing
sentiment.
is that?
Really lovely. Elsa, lovely to speak to you this morning, albeit under sad circumstances. We, of course, wish the Princess all the very best. I'll be back just after Easter. Dame Arlene Foster is going to fill in for me next Sunday. But, of course, Michael Portillo is up next. Until then, I'm wishing you a very, very happy Easter.
There's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package, including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash,